Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Junk Be Gone, Phoenix Conversions.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. I appreciate you joining us today. We've got a lot of football to talk about. Tennessee pausing practice, Tennessee unpausing practice. We'll get into that. We'll get into recruiting quite a bit in terms of how some of this COVID-related stuff and other conferences playing, not playing. How is that impacting Tennessee, if at all? Roster building for the future. A lot of stuff to get into. Let's get right into that stuff to get into. First segment brought to you by our friends at Junk Be Gone. Rentable 15-yard long dumpsters that you can fill with junk and they haul away. Professional crews to dismantle and carry off larger items of junk. Even shredding documents for your business. They do it all. Junk Be Gone, good locally owned, family-owned business right here in East Tennessee. JunkBeGone.biz to learn more. You can also call them, of course. Good folks really are a great business. I use them every year. Folks see the dumpster in my yard. And certainly there's many options that they can work out for you and with you. JunkBeGone.biz. All right, let's welcome in the panelists for the day. We're out here from WNML. We have Josh Ward. Josh, thank you.
John, good morning.
From GoVols247.com, GoVols247.com, I got it right. Ryan Callahan sits right there. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
And down in bubble number 3, we have Jimmy Hines from WNML. Jimmy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. As I said just a second ago, this show was kind of put together yesterday afternoon under the idea that Tennessee had paused practice. Jeremy Pruitt had said on Friday that they were canceling practice. They had seen, in his words, a few more positive tests for COVID, so they shut it down. They did tests on Friday morning. They wanted to see what the results were. They wanted to make sure there wasn't spread inside their building, that these new tests were the result of people outside the building, and it wasn't just going around their facilities there. Well, as of last night, they were back on the practice field, so the unpause button got hit. Jeremy Pruitt does this in a week when you look around the country. Alabama, University of Alabama now has more than 1,000 COVID cases on its campus. NC State has shut down their program for about a week. They're going to be opening up again tomorrow, they say. Lincoln Riley, head coach at Oklahoma, came out this week and said that he had an entire position group, and it's a group that on the field requires more than one player, so you're guessing offensive line, defensive, something. That whole group was down to one man due to COVID and people having to be quarantined. My question is, when you look at Tennessee, when you look at all this stuff going on, is this kind of what we're in for the fall in terms of stop, start, these guys are healthy, these guys aren't healthy? Is this what we should expect, just a year like no other?
I would say so. We have enough examples at this point, right? Because you didn't even lay them all out. We could keep going. And that doesn't mean you can't play games, but there could be a game that's affected. In Major League Baseball, we've seen some games that can't take place. You postpone, you pick back up when you're comfortable with where the numbers are. And whether we're talking about academics, like Notre Dame saying we're going online for a couple weeks, they're going back on to campus, or athletics where you pause practice, maybe it affects games. Austin Peay last night, they had reports before the game without players being named. Well, some players might be out. There was at least one high-profile player who did not participate in the game, so you maybe have games that take place with individual players not able to go.
Yeah, I think Major League Baseball is kind of the good example to go by. We've seen it get interrupted here and there, but it's not been a widespread problem so much yet, just a few teams here and there. I think it's kind of going to be that way all season. Tennessee may only deal with one or two of these issues, but some teams they play may deal with something the week of a game, and maybe something they all kind of get over once they settle in and get past this initial period where students have been settling into campuses. So I think it's going to be there throughout the year. It's just a matter of how much you deal with it and whether a position group gets wiped out at a portion of the season and causes some cancellations of games and things like that.
I'm not sure if I like the term the new norm, but that seems to be the situation right now. And as Josh alluded to, there are other programs out there that have been hit pretty hard too. I think we'll continue to see this as long as we still have students that are still on campus going for a while, which is why I thought it was probably smart of the SEC to delay the start of the season to September 26th. Maybe by then a lot of these things can be sorted out. But I do think we'll continue to see this. I wouldn't be surprised if we find out more schools are going to be shut down this next week for a variety of reasons, maybe one practice, maybe 3. It may happen with Tennessee again, but I do think we'll continue to see this over the next couple of weeks.
One interesting thing is going to be to see how the SEC handles this. You mentioned cancellation. Okay, let's say there are too many players on this team and too many players on this team to play a game, so we're going to cancel it. Who makes the call to cancel it? How is that reflected in the records? I mean, you're going to have people that are like, hey, if we're playing, I want a championship at the end of it. So let's say Alabama and LSU, and I know you've got a built-in week where you could make up a game, but let's say for some reason both those teams are just wiped out. Who's going to make that call? Do you think the SEC's already decided this? Because to my knowledge, they haven't told anyone this is our plan for cancellation. They talk about how they might cancel it, but not this is who makes the call on that. And this is how it will be reflected in the records.
Well, to me, that's one of the reasons they decided to go conference only, because you could ensure testing at the same levels, you can ensure certain standards, and because these decisions could simply go to the conference. Whereas if you had Tennessee playing Oklahoma, for instance, you'd have the 2 conferences and 2 schools bickering over how to handle it. So now the SEC will come up with some sort of policy. I'd love to know what it is. What's the magic number? You know, Major League Baseball has never really had a number on how many players, how many positive tests does it take to get a game canceled. The SEC probably needs a policy on that, but it's going to be a week-by-week thing, I think.
We don't know how many positive tests it takes to cancel the Tennessee practice. You know, it's more than 1. We know that. But also, I believe the SEC has scheduled an open date before the SEC championship game. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of a catch-all? If you have situations where you've had to postpone some games, is that the week when you try to replay some of them? And then do you replay them if they have no impact on the standings? Maybe you don't. Maybe you just let them go. I don't know the answers to that. Maybe the SEC at some point will come out with the solid guidelines that they have set.
It'll be interesting to see, just to put it in Tennessee's perspective, let's say that Tennessee and Florida have to have their game canceled, and yet Georgia said, and Tennessee's had a great year, and they're going to be coasting to Atlanta if they don't have to play Florida. You think Georgia's going to be okay with that? Well, they're just going to cancel it and send Tennessee to Atlanta. Sorry, Georgia, you lost a game. You lost to Florida. Tennessee doesn't have to play them. I just see that kind of thing being a big issue.
And I would like to see standards on that, because I worry about, you know, do teams take advantage of it and say, well, a couple of our best players are out. We have plenty to play, but we don't want to have to play without these guys, so we would rather postpone this game until the end of the year. I think that's where the conference needs to step in and have a rule and say, if you have this many players available, you have to play, and it's as simple as that.
You don't think fans, though, in the SEC will be just completely understanding because of the different circumstances? You guys, come on.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, coaches. I mean, let's say one team's wiped out. I'm guessing the other coach across the field who wants to take them on without their players isn't going to be thrilled. I don't see why they can't play. They have 28 guys. They don't need 85. I just think it's going to be an interesting situation to see how they play that out inside the conference. One other note to mention is wide receiver Deangelo Gibbs, who sat out last year after transferring from Georgia. He has opted out for the season. Now, I'm not sure. They haven't said. You guys may have something to report or something you've already reported that I've missed, but they haven't said whether or not that is a COVID opt-out. Jeremy Pruitt said he's going to focus on academics. Is that an academic opt-out? Is that COVID? Is it a mix-match of a mix and match, a mishmash of the two? Thoughts on Deangelo Gibbs opting out? Anything that you've heard behind the scenes?
No, I haven't. Although I was surprised, because I thought he was a guy that could be in the rotation. When you lose 2 quality receivers like Callaway and Jennings, I thought, okay, here's a really good athlete that's moved from the secondary at Georgia to receiver at Tennessee. I thought he might be somebody that could be a part of that equation, but I don't know specifics of what led to that decision.
Yeah. I've seen nothing, heard nothing.
I don't know for sure, but I've been led to believe that it is COVID-related at least, or at least that was a contributing factor. It may not have been the only factor, but I think that was at least part of the decision there. So surprising for sure, but we've seen some of these, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see 1 or 2 more.
Okay. We're talking about SEC guidelines and that type of thing. Well, they put down some game day guidelines that are going to impact Tennessee. It's a Tennessee tradition. We mentioned it about a month ago. There's going to be a Tennessee tradition of the last 50 years that goes away this year. We'll discuss that and Tennessee tailgating. We've got a lot of actual football talk coming up right after that, but let's get through this, the game day surrounding Neyland Stadium stuff next on the Sports Source.